That's fine. So the sister was basically asking, how can we move forward, in relation to the fact that, the community isn't unified necessarily in relation to its responses, and also some of the kind of arguments and the information can seem a little bit inaccessible to the community at large. How do we then use that information in a way that's proactive, that can galvanize? Is that a decent summary? So I guess I got the mic, so I'll start. But I mean, what I would say is that for me, the most important session of today was actually Sister Ibtihal's, because what she's doing is she's giving us actual tools to be able to go away with. That is key. Okay, it's not just about understanding the threat that PREVENT poses, but it's also about, okay, how do you counteract that? What's interesting for me always, and this has been really from the beginning of my work, people have always asked me, aren't you worried about the state? Aren't you worried that the state's going to come after you, constantly kind of exposing them and whatever else? And I always respond with the same thing. I feel like I'm the most protected person, because it's very difficult for the government, even if they dislike what I say, even if they try and spin what I say, to make up an out-and-out lie, okay? One that, to say something about me that is untrue to my belief or whatever, and they also know that in every circumstance I will know my rights as well. What Ibtihal will tell you, what I will tell you, what the guys in Prevent Watch, who I believe I saw here, will tell you, is that all of our clients are people who they felt that they could abuse because they didn't know their rights, who they were taken advantage of because it was felt like the security agencies or the police or whoever could have quick conversations with them, could gather evidence on them in a way that went outside of the law, okay? And so the first thing is we have to know what our rights are. And so I know Sister Abtahal does lots of different presentations. I know the Prevent Watch guys, they do presentations. You should invite these people, even if it's just 5, 6, 7 sisters or brothers in somebody's house somewhere. Do these small functions, put them on, and these people will come. We will come. Cage will come as well, and we will help you. We will do these sessions with you, because if we don't know what our rights are, we won't be able to challenge them effectively. Okay, and then, so much of the advice that Sister Ibtihal gave was so useful, because, unifying has to be on the basis of knowledge and understanding. Okay, like I mentioned, the problem with Prevent is that it is structurally racist, okay? It doesn't just affect, the people who, are suspected terrorists within our community. If it did, we would know instantly who they were going after. But the reality is that all of the cases we're receiving are people who are no one in the community, because the people who are applying Prevent just allow for their kind of everyday suspicions and fears to take a hold of them, and that's where the reporting process starts from. It doesn't start from the individual's activities. It starts from actually the person who is doing the reporting, how they perceive their students or their patients before them. And it's in that process of that perception that these referrals are made. Okay, and so what we have to do is, of course, we have to also educate our colleagues and friends and communities within the non-Muslim community about who Muslims are. That's a really important part of all of this, actually. That's a proactive thing that we can do as a community to say, look, this is what Muslims are about, really. Let's forget about what the Daily Mail says or what the Sun says. Here is who we are as a community, and that will, inshallah, help to get us over some of this negative perception that there is about us. But of course, first thing to do is to recognize that this comes from a point of structural Islamophobia.
Bismillah. As a woman and as a Muslim woman, I think this is really pertinent for us as sisters, because what I found is that Prevent, it operates on the psychology of victimhood. So you feel scared, you've taken this place of feeling scared, so what then ends up happening is that they will then go after you. They will take, liberties with you because they can see that you feel fearful. And I feel strongly that as Muslim women, because we are the ones who are normally taking our children to school, we are dealing with the teachers at school and what have you, it is absolutely crucial, and this is a message to the brothers, that we empower our wives and the mothers and what have you to be able to have those opportunities in the community to get together, to be discussing these issues, to be discussing the effects of Islamophobia on women specifically, and supporting that. Because then what you are doing is you are empowering the sisters to feel that if this situation were then to arise, in any setting, they would have the voice and the confidence to be able to do something about it. And I think it starts there. Because we do, a lot of our sisters, we have the psychology that we feel frightened. You know, we visibly look different, and we don't get that support. And I feel that that is a place where it begins. You know, women can only come together if the whole community is supportive of that. And we're not going to do that if we don't have that. So it's really important that we do that. And then we can have those discussions about how Islamophobia affects us, how we are feeling about if our children will be put to be pulled up at school, if they face a crisis such as if they want to take their children out of a nativity play. But those spaces just don't exist. And I think that that is a crucial point, that we need to destroy this psychology of having the lack of confidence and fear, especially for us mothers.
I'll just add one thing to it, which is where you can look at collective wisdom on it. You know, the nativity issue, subhanAllah, I'm from a generation where, you know, I was usually the shepherd or the rock in the nativity play. You know, so, you know, my parents had no understanding of these issues, and that's what we went through. But, you know, mashallah, you know, we're in an audience now where you can see there are a lot of people who are practicing, but a lot of people understand that you know, they wouldn't like to go. But there's a way of saying no to somebody. I think what you've got to try and make sure of is that when you say, I'd rather not my child be in the nativity play, that's fine. If you start saying to them that, but it's shirk and it's kufr, etc., I think you're likely to have everybody jump on you. Yes, you can theologically want to argue the point, fine. But you know what? Don't sort of invite fire upon yourself, okay? They can't say to you that, you know, well, why don't you? Just say, it's my right as a parent to say, I don't want my child to be in the nativity play. But please, my advice, and you can shoot me down in flames on this one, but really, I think that if you want to start going to Aqidah and Tawheed, you know, with your headmaster, you know what? I'm not saying to you that it's your own fault, but please don't be silly. You know, I think that's my only advice, is that, you know, that I was pulled over for a speeding issue with my, you know, family, and my son actually sort of said to me, Dad, calm down, because actually he could see that, you know, when you have, sometimes the cage mindset is that you're always against the system. And he just sort of pulled me back and said, you know what, Dad, you're gonna get locked up if you're gonna carry on this way. But I said, no, I want his name and I want his details, this is whatever. And I said, it's because I'm black and that's the reason why. Except, you know, but the thing is that just take good nasiha, take advice from people, and do things, as it says Islamically, don't do it when you're angry. Calm down. You know, it always says that if you're angry, you know, sit down, you know, make wudu. These type of things where you just have to suddenly say, don't act in anger. But genuinely, nativity play, I think, is easy. There was a person who worked at Prevent, a Muslim, who talked about his case at the House of Parliament a couple of months back. The sad thing for him, they just said the request that they didn't want their son to go to the proms, which was a mixed event. You know what? He's gone against Prevent now because they all jumped on him. So I think just look at these examples, is that sadly, we have to be a lot more savvy and aware that our Islamic values are going to be targeted, but you need to know how you know, push back on it with a little bit of hikmah. That's all I'd say. The grey man here is just giving you that piece of advice.
So the question was about homeschooling. It's a good one. So the CTS Act, the Counter-Terrorism Security Act, actually allows for a much wider range of schooling environments to be brought into it. Now the CTS doesn't specifically mention homeschooling, but Nikki Morgan, while she was still the education secretary, is she still the education secretary? No, she's not anymore, right? But while she was the education secretary, she specifically made a point about homeschooling, saying that, you know, there's potentially, you know, thousands of children who are being radicalized that we know nothing about because they've been taken out of the education system and nobody's tracking them, right? So there has been intimations that Prevent will find its way into the homeschooling sector as well, but we don't know exactly what that would look like. But of course, the reality is that Prevent runs through the entirety of the education sector. So Ofsted inspectors and the people in the council, whatever, so they've all been trained with Prevent. So even if it's not officially part of the policy yet, they will be looking out for that anyway. So, it's not something that, you could think you can just escape just because you're a homeschooler.
I was going to say in the homeschooling one, sorry, that we as GPs get asked a lot about these type of things. One area that might come up a lot is do they bring their children in for vaccination and stuff like that? And that's a very contentious area because I do have issues related to vaccination, particularly if it's badly informed, because our local imam said a couple of years ago that the flu vaccine had pork in it. And he was quite wrong because I actually sort of asked him, I said, well, actually look at this. And he said, no, read this in the Department of Health sort of thing. I said, no, actually you can't punctuate because it's saying the flu vaccine that is given in the arm has got no pork vaccine in it, but it's the vaccine that goes in the nose for the children is derived from pork. And this is something that Muslims have to make a decision on. You have every right to say that I don't want to have a vaccination. I speak to patients about that all the time, Muslim, non-Muslim. If they say, I don't want to have vaccination, it's not a problem. But the thing is that I think that those who homeschool, they will definitely get asked a lot of these kind of questions. How much interaction are they having with the doctors? And remember, most of us, I'm talking about healthcare professionals, we view that as a public health issue. So you may disagree with a lot of the stuff I say, but I often ask Muslim patients, I say, where is your dalil related to vaccination, please? What is your issue there? And you know what? When they go through their isnad, it usually goes back to a Christian scientist. So I say, please, can you at least follow what you do in terms of every other aspect? If it is from Islam and if there is a clear chain of narration with regard to it that you can say this is backed up, fine. But if you're going to go by internet and Christian scientists and Jehovah's Witnesses, that's fine. It's up to you. But just be aware that maybe you are on shaky ground. And I'm quite happy to have those discussions. If someone says at the end of it, thanks a lot, Jazakallah khair, doctor, I'm going to ignore you. I respect their wishes. But be aware that there are those issues that do come up.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one other thing to the brother. There are education officers that have to visit you, and they've all been trained in Prevent. In one case, I had a sister ring me, and the education officer was asking her children whether they listen to music, which she said was strange. She's never been asked that before. And the other sister I spoke to said that they were asking them whether they go to a school environment, a madrasa, and what are they learning at the madrasa. So when these education officers come, please know what their remit is, and they should know it. And if they go off on other things not linked to the curriculum, then you need to stop the meeting and say, why are you asking these questions? There's a reason for it. So be prepared.
Okay, so the question related to effectively where does Prevent money come from? Are there other organizations who are funding it? Are there other interests and so on and so forth? It's a good question especially because of the way that Prevent has gone global. Okay, so the UK is the country that kind of invented the concept of Prevent. Okay, it wasn't really anywhere else in the world before it. Now it's called Countering Violent Extremism around the rest of the world. The UK still calls it Prevent, but it does have this other name of CVE, or Countering Violent Extremism. In the UK, from what we know, all of the Prevent projects are funded by government. Okay, before, in the past, in the first iteration, so in the years between 2005 to 2011, the government was very open about who it was funding and how much it was funding, organizations like the Quilliam Foundation and so on and so forth. It would be very, very clear that, we're giving X amount of money for Prevent projects, right? But when Prevent was exposed as being a bit of a farce, where all these organizations were effectively taking the money, but had no ability to prove that they were actually de-radicalizing anyone, and were just using the funding in order to kind of promote their individual projects, then the government changed track because it was getting a bad rep from it, and started hiding that in other ways. So often what you'll find is when a Muslim charity or organization, their funding says funding from kind of safeguarding, or these other types of pots, so it's county council safeguarding funding or something like that. That's usually a euphemism for prevent. Okay, and so you have to go through a process of figuring out whether or not that is prevent. Okay, kind of previous report, the one that we published last summer, kind of highlighted that they call it one thing, but actually ultimately it's prevent funding. But now, because of the UK co-chairing with Abu Dhabi, the UAE in particular, as an overall structure, but their main center is in Abu Dhabi, countering violent extremism as kind of at a international level, what you find is that there's money coming from these dictatorships abroad that are pushing this agenda. So that's why you'll find certain scholars talking about this link between the Muslim Brotherhood and ISIS and whatever. So all of these foreign agendas about this kind of natural conveyor belt between ideologies and terrorism are playing out now more regularly. So, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, UAE, all of their kind of policies and thinking around terrorism is being mimicked word for word almost, because they're putting money back in, to it. They're helping to fund it, they're helping to perpetuate it. And so we have to be cognizant of that as well, so that when they come up with their ideas about who is and who isn't a terrorist, often there's a politics and a history behind there that we should be aware of.